So, and we are recording. So, bonjour, Sandie. Hello, ACC community. My name is Dr. Heather Barfield, and I am a professor of drama in the drama department at Austin Community College. And I am here speaking with my dear friend and colleague, dancer, choreographer, interdisciplinary artist from France, Sandie Donzica. So thank you, Sandie, for being here and interviewing with me tonight. How are you? Ça va?
I'm doing great. Ça va très bien, merci. Thank you, Heather, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to speak with you all today. So my name is Sandie Donzica. So as Heather said, I'm a choreographer, a dancer from France, and also a yoga and a dance instructor. And now I created my own company here in Austin, Texas, which is multidisciplinary. So right now in the United States, I work between the theater, the dance, and the music aspect. And right now I'm starting to export my work to France. So I really work between the two countries.
And how long have you been here in the United States as an artist or as yourself, really?
So I've been here for about 5 years now, and I started to do several trips on and off, and I really settled a few years ago. And then I keep traveling now. I try to do my work in both countries, and so I really do the base of my work here. That's where I created my company. That's where I do the main part of the creation process. And then I tour in France or in Germany sometimes when I can. So, yeah.
So, will you perhaps give us a sense of the kind of art that you like to create? You're a choreographer, a dancer, an interdisciplinary artist. Can you explain a little bit about what that means to our ACC community?
Oh, absolutely. So I was trained as a contemporary dancer and therefore contemporary teacher and choreographer. But what really interests me in choreographing and art in general is to mix art and artists together. So I've always been highly interested in working with musicians and in working with actors, theater people. So I've been doing that from the beginning pretty much since I arrived in Austin. I worked in different theaters and I did a lot of multidisciplinary work. Um, I love to work at some point with painters, with singers, with actors, with poets. Uh, I like the mix. But right now, I really focus in between the theater, the music, and the dance. I especially like bringing the work to people as well. So I do a lot of work that is outside, that is site specific. I always try to make it multicultural as well. So in my work, you can hear a lot of French, a lot of English, but sometimes some Spanish too. I work with a lot of different types of artists, and I love the mix.
So what inspires you? You come all the way from what region in France, Sandy? I know, but maybe you can share with everyone else.
So I come from the south of France, the French Riviera, La Côte d'Azur. So it's close to Marseille, Nice. That's the region on the sea.
And so you move from one of the most beautiful places in the world to our humble home here in Austin, Texas. And so what is it about the arts and the community in Austin that inspires you? And what do you think that you bring to the Austin community as an interdisciplinary international artist?
Oh, so from the very first time, what I really loved about Austin is to find this mix of artists and to find a huge will for collaboration. And I found that amazing. I found that in Austin, artists are very resourceful, and that was very nice for me to see. So I was able to work with a ton of different people. That was extremely exciting and nourishing. Um, what I'm happy to do in Austin is really to bring a part of my culture here and to bring a part of my technique, which is extremely different from the European technique to the American technique, specifically in dance. So I love to bring that mix. Uh, so of course, but I don't work only with French artists. There's very few French artists in Austin. I'm the only French dancer, actually, a choreographer in Austin. So I love to work with American artists, obviously, but also Latin artists. I really do appreciate the mix that we can find in Austin and absolutely love the collaboration.
And when you work with within the Austin theater community, in what ways do you present your craft and your practice? Because I know you go beyond dance in the theater community. Can you discuss that, including some of the things like site-specific work, which is a very unique term that a lot of people in the theater world like to use, very innovative theatrical styles that you tend to play around in as an artist. Can you share what some of that looks like and what that means to you, that sort of work?
Well, absolutely. So in most of my work, I think the narrative is very important. That's where it's linked to the theater. I love to give a lot of sense and a lot of depth to my work that can be closer to maybe not necessarily a script, but a narrative. I love to use my voice as a dancer, and I think the most important part for me would be the emotions that I translate. So sometimes my emotions don't necessarily go only through my body, but they go beyond the dance motion and go into the theatrical expression. So I use my face a lot. I use a motion that could be more theatrical, as I said. So I push the boundaries from the dance going into the theater. So I don't necessarily do a theater. I'm not a trained classical actress, um, but I go beyond the dancer's role. And that's what I really like to do, is to challenge the barriers between both. I really like to mix the style together. And what I really enjoy to do since I moved to Austin is to actually bring this contemporary dance that can seem sometimes very technical or maybe sometimes exclusive, to bring it to a lot of different weird, unexpected places. I've created dance spaces for theater yards, for gardens, for parks, um, and I keep exploring the idea of where I could bring the dance. So for me, it's really interesting to play between inside of a theater on the stage, professional stage, and in the public space. So I like to switch between both.
And you've performed in places like city halls, right? When you were in France, you were in a civic space at one point. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did.
And
I did.
so I can describe it a little bit. Is that Sandie is in sort of the middle of a normally a public space, and people are surrounding her, encircling her as she is doing her movement as well as interacting with audience members, and not only as you were saying, the boundaries between your practice as a dancer and as perhaps a theatrician, if you will, a dramatist, cross, but also the boundaries between the audience having a separate space from the performer, that also gets enmeshed and sort of less defined in your work oftentimes. And that includes the interaction that you have with musicians, because in some of the work that I've seen you do, the musician may be playing an instrument, but you are playing with the musician playing the instrument at the same time. That you are they're not an invisible quality to the movement and the performance, but they become part of the inspiration of your performance, which I believe, from what I know about you and your work, a lot of it is based in improvisation. So all of this is to lead to this element of surprise in your work, and the element of unpredictability that I think is really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about that aspect of your work? Um, how you, I guess, muster the courage, if you will, especially in new and different environments, even as an international artist to a certain extent. How do you manage that spontaneity in your work? Does that
Oh,
drive you to a certain extent?
oh yes. Well, so over the years, I pretty much specialized in improvisation and interactivity with the audience. Um, so for me, nothing is closed or set, sealed or concrete, which means a dancer is not just a dancer. A musician is not just a musician. For me, we all performers on stage. So I'm going to bring my musician into the movement and I'm going to enter in the music. Something about the theater. So for me, it all goes together, and I like to create a kind of symbiosis between us, and not create a kind of hierarchy. For me, we're all on the same level and we all share the space together. But it goes the same way for the audience. For me, I don't like to have this wall that can separate the artist and the audience, and I always try to break that in some kind of manner. And sometimes if it's on the stage, it might not necessarily going into the audience, but it could be through the emotion, through the way I would play with them, I would look at them, and would create a kind of intense connection, even if it's not physical. But most of the time, it's true that I go into the audience, or I actually create the piece made for the audience to be in, to be included, for the audience to be part of the piece, or to be surrounded by the piece. And a lot of time it's true that I like to actually plan performances that are not necessarily known by the audience. So a lot of times that actually happened when the audience or the people that were here were actually not really an audience. They didn't know they were an audience. And so we brought the performance to them. So of course it's challenging for me because it's a culture that I'm not necessarily used to, or people are not necessarily there for a performance or to be actively engaged in the performance. But I like to create this kind of challenge, this kind of maybe awkwardness at first between people, because that's when you get the really natural human reaction and therefore the natural deep human connection. So I keep doing that, and sometimes it works, sometimes a little less, but it's always a good and deep learning experience to do that for both of us, for the people, for the artist, and for the people, audience members.
And when, let's say you are working not on your own art, but let's say that you've been commissioned perhaps to work as a choreographer with a theater director. In what ways are you, sorry if you hear a puppy barking in the background, that's my puppy. Um, um, there's food cooking. So as you know, you're French, when the food starts cooking, the dogs will start barking. So when you are working with a director and who has their own language of the stage that they're trying to communicate, in what ways are you um, following kind of the director's vision, and in what ways do you influence the director's vision through your choreography and movement? How do you go about negotiating that space?
Um, so for me, actually, the flexibility is what is the most important in a cast and to create a show together. Um, so actually, when I choreograph for a play, I don't create a choreography for the play. That's not really how I see it. I create the movements that would fit the character, that will fit the play. So of course, I talk and work extensively with the director, and I spend a lot of time trying to understand the actors, trying to see how they move naturally, what they can do, what are their assets, what they like to do, and how they like to interpret their characters. And then from that, I base my choreography really on what I see from them. I never arrive with a very finished set choreography because I know it's not going to work. It's not going to be what sparks, what works on stage. So for me, I think I really create a collaborative process with the actors. It's a deep process. It usually takes us a long time to know each other, to understand what we can actually really do together. Because for me, there's no point to actually just bring just my work and put it on them. That's not how our work, and that's not what I think would look the best on them. So yes, it's definitely collaborated.
And uh, just because I don't want to take up too much of your time, and also there's lots more stuff with the International Festival in particular, and this is one of many, I'm sure, moments. I do want to follow up with a question regarding, and let's not be too morose, but the idea that COVID-19 has affected many artists in the performing arts world, and our ability to interact with audiences and be in front of audiences, of course, is drastically impeded upon right now. So, out of curiosity, in what ways have you found um, means, methods, forms during COVID-19? Are you working on something right now even? Uh-oh, I may have lost you for a moment. 2, 1. We lost Sandie for a minute, and we have now changed scene. Scene change. Interior. Sandie Donzica's apartment living room. Unhailing her hair behind her. So a little lesson in script writing. When we left and got cut off, I was asking you about what you're working on now, and especially during COVID, um, you know, the impact that it has had on performing artists is pretty severe. So, in what ways have you reinvented yourself in your art, like many of us have had to do?
Absolutely. It's true that it's really hard for everyone. So I gotta say that I took actually time to process. I didn't want to rush into something very new. Yeah, I wanted time to reflect on what was happening to me and to all of us and what it meant for our industry. So it took a little bit of time, and then I figured out that it's true that with time we can slowly adapt if we want. Of course, we don't have to adapt if we don't want to. But slowly, slowly, I started to adapt, and I started to think that I could not do the exact same type of work that I was doing. Obviously, I don't have the audience really, or the same medium, so it's not exactly the same thing. But on the contrary, I thought that I could actually use the new tools that I have to provide a different experience to the audience and actually to guide them into something more specific. So to guide them into my world, my universe, in a more precise and maybe more direct way. So right now I'm experimenting a lot actually with the virtual world. I'm starting to create dance films, to create virtual performances. So I keep working with dancers and artists through Zoom, like all of us. So yes, the creation process definitely continues. And I think it actually gives me more time to go more in depth in the type of shows that I wanted to work on. So on that, it's definitely a good thing. So yes, it takes a different path, but it keeps going.
And hopefully, we will all meet again in person, in the flesh, to experience the wondrous, transformative act of live performance before our very eyes and breath in the same room. I look forward to the day in which we can all do that together again. Um, well, in closing, merci beaucoup. And I hope that your career blossoms and that your success is not hindered by COVID. If maybe in parting, do you have any advice for perhaps students of either drama or dance or in the performing arts in general? Any advice that you could possibly give, especially for students that might be international students that have moved to Austin? Do you have any words of wisdom to impart to them?
Um, I think that as artists, and especially young artists, we need to always believe in ourselves. I know that it's actually really hard most of the time, and we're really looking for main style, but maybe there's a lot of things we love. There's a lot of different types of artists we'd like to work with, and we should always follow what we really want to do and always believe that there's a place for art. And especially for international students and international artists, it's true that sometimes what we do might not always fit in the culture we are in. It doesn't mean that it's not valid or it's not actually a good thing to bring to the culture. So of course it could be very new or it could be very weird sometimes, but I think it's definitely good for us to keep bringing it and to keep showing it and yeah, to further that cultural mixity. So let's keep going.
Bon courage, oui. And I encourage all students that are interested in pursuing drama to talk to Marcus McCorder, the department chair, and know that even though I'm speaking with somebody who is primarily trained in the dance world and the dance community, she's also a dramatist professional. In many ways, theater has moved more and more towards integrating all sorts of forms to become live entertainment for people. And this is a worthy field. And as Sandie said, do what you love, and people will probably flock to you over time. Persistence is key.
Absolutely.
Thank you again so very much. And I really do look forward to seeing your work in person again. So thank you, Sandie. And bonsoir.
Bonsoir, Heather. Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.